Today, I want to share my opinion on the common mistakes found in finished scale models, not during the building process, but in fully assembled, painted, and completed models. Everything I say is purely my personal, subjective opinion. You may agree or disagree, but in any case, I look forward to discussing it with you in the comments. This will be a talk-based video with footage of my current model building process in the background. I will include minimal example photos to avoid offending anyone because pointing out mistakes in someone else's work would be unfair and likely unwelcome. And yes, I am still using AI for narration since I don't speak English fluently yet. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It's easy for you but really helps the channel grow. 1. Uncleaned seams and cutter marks. This is a common issue, even in well-built and painted models. It's not necessarily a critical mistake, but for example, an uncleaned seam on the two halves of a tank barrel or gun can be very distracting. Such small details can break the sense of realism. Another, less common mistake is an unsuccessful separation of a part from the sprue. Sometimes, a recess is left where the gate was, and some modelers leave it as is. This too can stand out noticeably on a finished model. These are general mistakes that apply to armor, aircraft, and naval models alike. The second mistake on my list is related to armored vehicles: unrealistic track sagging. If you're assembling metal tracks, this won't be an issue, as they naturally sag under their own weight. However, things are different with link and length or vinyl tracks. To achieve a realistic sag, always refer to photos of the real vehicle. And here's an interesting fact. If you examine real tank photos, finding examples with significant track sag is not an easy task. On most tanks, the sag is either minimal or completely absent, as seen on the T-34 or Tiger. From this, we can conclude that while track sag can make a model look more dramatic, it often does not match the real prototype. Even worse is when the sag looks unnatural, too excessive or bent, in a way that real tracks could never hang. So, I recommend paying more attention to track details and always checking real-life references. The next mistake also concerns ground vehicles and their running gear. It's quite common to see a model of a wheeled vehicle with one wheel floating in the air. I've encountered this issue myself, and I'll use this model as an example of how it happens. If your model is displayed without a diorama or base, this flaw will be visible from most angles, ruining the overall impression. If the model is placed on a diorama, the terrain can help hide the issue, which is exactly what I did. How can you avoid this problem? Before the glue sets, place the model on a flat surface and check that all wheels touch it. If there's a gap, fix it immediately, as it will be nearly impossible to correct once the glue hardens. This issue can also occur with tank road wheels, so be sure to check their alignment before final assembly. Next, let's talk about wheels and tires again. Specifically, incorrect tread direction, or mounting tires backwards. What do I mean by backwards? This happens when modelers install tires with the tread pattern facing the wrong way. If all four wheels are mounted incorrectly, only experts who know the correct tread direction will notice. But if three wheels are facing one way and the fourth is reversed, even people unfamiliar with cars or modeling will spot the mistake. So, before attaching tires to the rims and wheels to the model, always check reference photos of the real vehicle. This will help you avoid such errors. To wrap up the topic of wheels, let's discuss another common mistake among modelers. This is painting wheels and rubber parts of road wheels in pure black. You might say, but in reality they are black. What's the issue? The issue is that real tires are not completely black. In fact, there are many paints specifically designed to replicate rubber black. In my opinion, painting wheels in basic black makes the model look toy-like. It loses some of its realism, and in photos, it no longer feels like a scale replica of a real vehicle, all because of pitch black tires. It may seem like a minor detail, but it significantly affects realism. So, get the right shade of paint and avoid making this mistake. The next point is unblended washes. I've even noticed this on my own models. After a photo shoot, I would look at the pictures and see areas where the wash was applied, but not properly blended. For most people, this might go unnoticed, but it's always better to avoid such issues. The other side of this problem is missing washes in certain areas. The best and simplest advice to prevent this mistake is to take your time and avoid applying washes to the entire model all at once. Ideally, spread the process over several days so you can evaluate your work with fresh eyes each time. This way, the chances of making wash-related mistakes drop to almost zero. Moving on, let's talk about illogical chipping. It's important to understand that chips appear in areas exposed to mechanical wear, contact with the environment, branches, buildings, obstacles, or human interaction. For example, door edges and fender tips will have far more chipping than the roof or hood. On armored vehicles, areas around hatches and fender skirts tend to wear more than the turret. Additionally, vehicles moving through rubble or dense vegetation will show more chipping on the suspension and lower parts. To make chips look realistic, apply the same principle as with washes. Don't add them all at once. Paint some chips, then step away and revisit them after a few hours or the next day with a fresh perspective. Otherwise, it's easy to get carried away with weathering and lose a sense of balance. I've made that mistake myself. Pausing is always a good idea. Scratches are another detail worth mentioning. They should be very thin. A 1 millimeter scratch on a model, when scaled up 35 times, would be 3.5 centimeters in real life. While such large scratches exist, they are not the norm. The same goes for chipping. Scale realism matters, so avoid making them excessively large or unrealistic. Yes, a heavily rusted tank can look impressive. However, in reality, tanks in such a condition are extremely rare. While excessive rust may enhance the dramatic effect, it also reduces realism. If the exhaust or thin metal parts around it can rust over years of use, armored steel is much more resistant to corrosion. In fact, for armor to develop noticeable rust, decades must pass. And even then, it's not guaranteed. It's also hard to imagine a tank crew allowing their vehicle to deteriorate to such a state. And even if they did, their commanding officer would quickly put an end to it. So, excessive rust on tanks and armored vehicles usually makes the model look less realistic. Keep this in mind when working on your project. Scale-appropriate weathering. This isn't about the overall amount of dirt or mud splashes, but about keeping them to scale. It might not be as obvious as oversized paint chipping, but dirt splashes the size of an orange on a model definitely look out of place. Approach weathering carefully and avoid rushing the process. There are two key reasons for this. A fresh look after a break helps avoid mistakes. In reality, dirt accumulates in layers. It doesn't appear all at once, but builds up over time in different shades and textures, depending on the environment. To replicate this on a model, apply dirt gradually using multiple colors and techniques, and most importantly, don't overdo it. It's easy to get carried away and lose a sense of proportion. If you make a mistake with paint chipping, you can always repaint and try again. But removing excessive dirt from a model is much more difficult. Cargo on the model. The 10th point concerns the cargo carried by the model. Adding some cargo to a tank, something the crew would transport, can become a highlight of the model. Various spare parts, trophies, household items like barrels or other loads. First of all, one thing I often notice is that the transported cargo is sometimes painted and finished much more simply than the model itself, as if the modeler ran out of energy and finished the cargo as an afterthought. Secondly, illogical cargo. For example, post-war jerry cans on World War II tanks, or spare parts that are completely unnecessary for field repairs, such as drive sprockets. Thirdly, a complete failure. When the cargo is assembled, well painted, and logically arranged, but it is not fixed or secured in any way. Perhaps the modeler thinks it's not very noticeable. Maybe for those unfamiliar with modeling in vehicles, it really isn't. But those who engage in modeling or simply have logical thinking understand that an unsecured load on a tank would travel only a few meters before falling to the ground. That's why I strongly recommend considering these aspects. When placing any cargo on your model, imagine how it would behave in real life. Would it require securing or not? The 11th and final point is photography. Not many of us attend exhibitions and view models in person. Instead, we see them on various forums and thematic groups through photographs. Thus, photography is the medium through which you present the advantages of your model, making others admire and appreciate it. In addition to the general recommendation of treating a model's photo shoot as one of the final stages of its construction with the same level of seriousness, I have a few more suggestions. First, never use a flash when photographing a model. Ever. A flash will nullify all the advantages of your model and bring all the flaws to the forefront. Second, never photograph the model on a workbench, surrounded by paint jars and tools. This does nothing good for the model. Don't photograph it on a newspaper, a bedsheet, against wallpaper, or in your home or garage interior. A model photographed this way loses all sense of realism. Additionally, these distracting backgrounds will draw attention away from the model itself. Third, photographing against the light, such as on a windowsill. This has the same issue as the previous point, but in addition, the model will be poorly visible due to the bright window light, making it appear too dark to discern details. So, how should you photograph? There are inexpensive photo light boxes that solve most photography problems. If you want, you can make a light box yourself using a cardboard box and white sheets. General photography tips: only a solid colored background and good lighting. At least 2 desk lamps. My ideal conditions are outdoor photography in a natural setting. Here, I show some of my works that I photographed outside. However, you should also consider the background. If it's a World War II diorama, modern houses and cars shouldn't be in the frame. Also, consider the weather. A winter diorama will look strange on a sunny summer day. In general, photography is something that can either ruin your model or, on the contrary, elevate it to a new level. These were my 11 subjective points that indicate a bad model. Yes, no one likes criticism, not even me. So, for the sake of balance, I'll soon release a video about the signs of a good model. So don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and we can discuss in the comments whether you agree with me or not. That's all for now, and see you next time.